Let me stop talking. So well done. You've been consistent. Fantastic stuff. Big ups to you. And I see Sewese here too. And a few other faces I think I recognize, or names I think I recognize. Judah, you are. Oh, Uncle Max is here. Let me keep quiet. Okay, dokes.
My Ogasa, you cannot keep quiet when I'm here.
I'll keep quiet to Uncle Max.
Well
are you
done,
in Lagos?
Sir.
This is your background. Are you in Lagos?
Yes, I am actually, yes. Okay, it's true, yes, you've come here before. So.
You're giving me the expo now. I visited Max's office in Lagos. He gave me the expo.
That's true.
Well done, sir. I saw you at the neck yesterday.
Okay, yes. That neck dragged on and on.
Man, it dragged on. It dragged on. I went out, as in I left, and then came back and rejoined later till the end, finally.
Okay.
You did your presentation, no?
No. I think when the time became short and I had something to do, so I just messaged them that I wouldn't be able to. So they said all those ones that were not able to present were just adopted. Okay. Because I had to leave at some point. I couldn't continue.
It was long. Long. Well done, sir.
Well done, sir. Yeah. Well done, Ms. Juliana. Good to see you. And
thank you very much, sir.
Yes, evening to everyone. Sorry for disrupting your meeting. So it's 4:30, so let me keep quiet so you can start.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I welcome you to this the fourth quarter of the
good evening, ma'am.
Thank you. So on behalf of the convener, Mrs. Juliana Imam, I welcome you to the fourth quarter of this session of the Gypsy Mentorship Program, which is also the last quarter for 2021. Today is also our Independence Day, so I'll say Happy Independence, Nigeria, Happy Independence to everyone. My prayer for Nigeria today is that the labor of our heroes past will not be in vain and will rise above our limitations as individuals and as Nigerians as a whole. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
Okay, so
a big amen.
All right, thank you so much. So my name is Sewese Yaji Aondo. I will be anchoring the program for today. I'm a lawyer and a certified mediator residing in Abuja, and I was also a mentee in the second quarter of the program held earlier this year. Okay, so the program today is divided into 3 sessions. So we'll be taking presentations from the mentees, grouped into about 5 groups, and then we'll proceed to presentations from the mentors, and then we'll take the questions and answers, and then we'll close for the day. So I'd like to proceed into the program. I'd like to give us a brief review of what the Gypsy Mentorship Program is all about. Okay, so I'd like to confirm if everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can hear. I can hear you loud and clear.
We can hear.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
So the Gypsy Mentorship and Internship Program is a quarterly intellectual property mentorship program for law students, young lawyers, and intellectual property enthusiasts across Africa. Mentees are afforded the opportunity to access valuable intellectual property advice, training, network, mentorship, internship, discussion forums, industry updates, and resource materials from experienced IP mentors. This program seeks to encourage continuous intellectual property training, development, and evolution in Nigeria, Africa, and around the world. Our hashtag is Gypsy MIP, that's JIIPCC MIP. You can follow us on our social media platforms and subscribe to watch our videos by searching for Gypsy on YouTube and Facebook. So the objectives of the Gypsy Mentorship Program are to provide easy access to intellectual property, Okay, sorry, I'll take that again. The objectives of the program are to provide easy access to intellectual property guidance, training, and resource materials for students, young lawyers, and IP enthusiasts across Africa. It also facilitates dialogue and network among experienced and less experienced intellectual property practitioners and stakeholders. It also transforms mentees into intellectual property mentors and leaders for the next generation of mentees. And then finally, it facilitates intellectual property mentorship, internships, scholarships, and intellectual property related job placements for mentees. Okay, so that's it. That's all about the Gypsy mentorship program and its objectives. So we'll proceed into the program proper at this moment. So we'll begin with presentations from the mentees. So like I earlier mentioned, the mentees are grouped into 5. So we'll be taking presentations from the group representatives. So we'll begin with group 1. You have 7 minutes for your presentation, so please adhere to time. So group 1, if group 1 is ready, well, please take your presentation. Is group 1 ready? Okay, so if group 1 is not ready, we'll proceed to group 2.
Hello. Hello. Yeah, we are. Good evening.
Okay, good evening, Gabriel. Please go ahead. You have 7 minutes for your presentation.
We are encouraged to put on our videos, right? So
yes, you are.
Okay. Without much ado, I'll just go straight to the point. So we are looking at intellectual property and the economy. That's the topic for discussion today. The next slide, please. So to help us to carry every one of us along, we'll be looking at what intellectual property is. We'll be looking at why intellectual property, the aspects of IP, and intellectual property as a tool for economic development. We'll look at problems that intellectual property is currently facing, and we'll conclude, then prefer 1 or 2 recommendations, maybe 3. So intellectual property basically is that aspect of law that seeks to protect intangible creations. You know, the World Intellectual Property Organization says it is the protection of intangible creations, you know, your brainchild, what we call brainchild, products of the mind that as we go on, I think I'm trying to jump the gun and I don't want to do that. So just as we have it on the slides, it's to protect the property of the mind. You know, it can also be seen as a legal right that is conferred on those that are engaged in creative and inventive activities, which is the product of a person's mental effort, like I earlier said. So we move, please. So intellectual property, why intellectual property? Number 1, it helps to foster creativity. Actually, there are 2 principles that intellectual property hinges on. One of it is to encourage creativity, as we have seen, and the second is to ensure that people get some reward for their mental labor, for their efforts. Right? And so IP seeks to offer protection for creative works and ensure that the rights attached to them are not infringed upon. IP seeks to reward persons who have, sorry for that typo, exercise their skill, knowledge, talents in creating a work. Yeah, so there is the economic benefit of it, and there's also the moral aspect of it. So aspects of intellectual property, there are many, you know, intellectual property, but we do have some major aspects, and that's what we'll be looking at for, today. So we have copyright. Copyright is basically that aspect of intellectual property that helps you protect your works of. Okay. This is the type of IP rights which seeks to protect creative works subject to being original and fixed, giving the owner the exclusive rights over such works. So what this is simply saying is that it protects literary, musical, artistic work, but for it to be protected under copyright, it has to be, number one, original, and it has to be fixed. You have to put it either on a video format or a fixed medium like that. And patent seeks to protect inventions or improvements. Going by what the Patent Act says, it seeks to protect new works, inventive work, or if it is an improvement on an already existing work. And so it confers the right to prevent others from commercially exploiting that invention, especially when it is registered. Of course, this is not forever, for a certain period of time, but it gives that room. We have industrial design, which protects the shape. There's something about Apple products when you see them, they're just like Steve Jobs would say, it's not sexy enough. There's just something about the shape. There's something about the Coca-Cola bottle. When you see it, you know it by its shape, the colors and all those other stuff. So that's what industrial design is about. It seeks to protect the appearance of a product so that they are not passed off by other free riders in the market. We have trademark, which is basically the mark by which a trade or a product is known for. A mark, it could also be what we call service mark. So a mark a mark used or proposed to be used in relation to goods for the purpose of indicating a connection between the goods and the proprietor of the goods. So when I go to the market to say I want to buy an Apple product, I already know that one of the things that will help me recognize an Apple product, it's if I see a chopped apple, an apple that has been, I already know, okay, I think this is an Apple product. And so we have trade secrets, which refers to information which forms the crux of a business operation or its operation. Just put in another word, proprietary information or secrets that should not go out, because if it does go out, it will not be good for a particular business. So that's just it. Now we look at, and there is the reason we had to look at those things because we needed to look at some the basics of IP briefly. So before we can now start talking about its use, its impact on the economy. And so here we are saying that IP is a tool for economic development, and that IP plays a role in the production and distribution of goods and services in any society. And it also fosters innovation for developing countries, which can also be a source of foreign direct investments or revenue, to put in another words. And so IP increases the market value of a product, which promotes economic growth and innovation. And the increase in number of patent application also increases research and development, which stimulates economic and technological development. Okay, so we are just saying the same thing, that look, nations who take IP seriously are doing well, right? Well, the global brands that we have today, most of their revenues comes from intangible assets, of which IP is part of. So that's the essence of this particular slide. So move please to the next slide. So IP protection affects commerce throughout the economy by providing incentives to invent and create. You see, that's one of the things that IP does. It encourages people to keep creating, to keep inventing. And yeah. And it also facilitates specialization in technological markets. And so IP creates a platform for financial investment in innovation, supporting startup liquidity and growth through mergers, acquisition. And this is very true. Sometimes when people do mergers and acquisition, what they calculate, they fail to put into consideration the brand, the intellectual property of the particular brand. And so people go ahead to calculate the cost of buildings, machineries, and they do not put into consideration, okay, how much is our name worth? How much, if we are going to sell our goodwill in terms of currency, in terms of the dollars or naira, how much is it worth? So that's one of the things that IP does. And any nation who understands this so well, they tried. So we look at case studies. There are many case studies on this, but we will focus our attention on one. But we see IP in gaming and fantasy sports. There's no time because of the limited time we have. Influencers and online content creators. And we also have IP in growing massively in emerging technologies like AR, VR, virtual reality, even blockchain, name them. But for today, we are just going to look at a typical example of the ShopRite franchise. So ShopRite here is what we call the franchisor. It licenses its name, trademark, secrets, put in other words, its IP, or to another person to do business with, which we call the franchisee. So this person starts running a ShopRite. That's where am I? I think I'm rushing. Pardon me. So franchise basically is I'm the owner of ShopRite. I want to expand ShopRite, get it all over the world. So I'm calling people, okay, please come in. I'll give you the right to use my name, ShopRite. I will give you the modus operandi, how it's going to be run, and I'll tell you how they're going to be run. While you keep doing business in my name, making profit, then these people who get the franchise, the franchisees will start paying some form of royalty to me, who is the owner of ShopRite. So looking at this is one of the ways by which intellectual property grows the economy. And we said other examples of companies that use the franchise business model include United Parcel Service, UPS, and the McDonald's Corporation. So what are the problems that we face in intellectual property in Nigeria and most African countries? There's lack of awareness of IP rights for creatives. A lot of creatives don't know this. There's relatively high cost of registration. And then we have obsolete laws which do not cover relevant scope of intellectual property, as we have in extant laws, the Copyrights and Act and other ones. Thank God for the bill being reviewed in the National Assembly as we speak. So there's inadequate protection for traditional knowledge and indigenous works. So these are some of the problems that we were able to come up with and find. Our recommendations is that there should be a universal policy for the protection of traditional knowledge. We don't want our grandfathers, to die without passing across the roads the secret to that herb. You say you have malaria, you say you have this, and before you know, Baba will go to his backyard and pick 1 or 2 herbs, and before you know, he administers it to you, and you're fine. So we need to be able to protect some of these traditional knowledge. So there should be mechanism for curtailing online breaches of copyright, which is a major issue. And there should be sensitization of IP rights to create awareness through trainings. We also need to, if we are not able to overhaul, then we should be able to amend our laws to include for copyright, IP rights such as trade secrets, geographical indications, and the others. Then lastly, we need to have a proper legal advice. This is for those who are running businesses, should be sought before going on. So carrying on a venture. So the last slide, please. Or is that all? Okay, this is all for us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabriel, for that presentation on behalf of Group 1. So we'll proceed to Group 2. If Group 2 is ready, kindly unmute and make your presentation. And please be mindful of time. You have 7 minutes for your presentation. Is Group 2 ready? Okay, so if Group 2 is not ready yet, we'll proceed to Group 3. for their presentation.
Good evening, everyone.
Okay. All right, thank you. So you have 7 minutes for your presentation.
My name is Olamide, and I'm representing Group 3. Okay, definition of IP and economy. Intellectual property is basically creations of the mind that comes from the intellect, such as inventions, literary and artistic work, designs, symbols, names, images used in commons. Okay, the law deters other people from copying and taking unfair advantage of this work or their reputation of another and provides remedies where this arises. Our economy is defined as the state of a country or region in terms of the production and consumption of goods and services and the supply of money. Next slide. Intellectual property in the Nigerian economy today. Intellectual property exists basically in almost every invention and expression of art, and as such is an inevitable part of the economy. An economy which understands the value of intellectual property and effectively utilizes them we definitely thrive in its all-round development. The basic types of intellectual property are patents, we have trademark, we have industrial designs, we have copyright, we have trade secrets, and we have industrial designs and others. Intellectual property are rights, they are legal rights that protect the creator's original works and inventions, even the appearance of the product of the intellect. Okay, intellectual property rights, as I've stated, copyright is a set of exclusive rights granted by the law of a jurisdiction to the author or creator of an original work, including the rights to copy. Basically, the owner of the copyright is to determine who can translate the work, who can use the work, who can sell the work. Copyrights provide incentives for the creative, in which encourages the person to produce more. I mean, if someone is getting profit from their work, he encourages them to produce more, to make more, to create more innovation. Without copyright, there would be no incentives for creative, hence there would be none of the aforementioned eligible works. The effect of this would be an illiterate and archaic economy with a lot of lapses to fill. I mean, if everyone can copy from another person, if someone produces a book and someone can easily translate it, and the real owner, the original owner of the work is not getting any profit, it will affect consumers, it's going to affect the original owner of the work and as well as the economy. Trademark. Trademark serves as marks of trade, as the name implies. A trademark is a distinctive name, sign, logo, which uniquely identifies the source of goods and services that differentiates one trader's goods or services from those of another. An example is KFC and McDonald's. They have their own logo, they have their name, which differentiates the services they offer to people. Okay, they differentiate one trader's goods or services from those of another. They are shorthand description of a product. They create the need for positive competition and are an incentive to manufacturers to maintain products of high quality of goods in the market. As I said earlier, if these original creators of their works are getting profits back from what they do, they create more, they put more inputs into their work. Industrial design is an ornamental or aesthetic part of a useful article, which may consist of the shape, pattern, or color of the article and must appeal to the eye. It could simply be said to be the combination of lines or colors or both, and any three-dimensional form. This is the outline of the products, how the products look, how the shape is, the design, the physical aspect of the product, how the product is basically how the product is definitely shaped. A patent is more of innovation, technical innovations in the medicine area. A patent can otherwise be called an incentive for the ability and further productivity of medicine, vaccines, and scientific inventions. For instance, this COVID-19 era, the people that created the COVID-19 vaccine, they have specific rights, and they can license these rights to other people, or they can keep the rights of the vaccines to themselves. Without these incentives, there would be such shortage of medicine, vaccines, and scientific inventions, or an abundant supply of counterfeits to the detriment of the community, of the economy. If there is no intellectual property law, anyone will be able to make counterfeits of the products, and this won't benefit the economy because you won't know the real thing, you won't know the quality of what you're buying, you won't know the quantity of what you're buying. So there'll be counterfeits around, nobody will know the real stuff, nobody will know if this is the real one, if intellectual property rights are not protected. Effects of intellectual property of the economy. Technology played an important role in the economic growth of major world economies like UK, USA, United Kingdom, United States of America, and emerging economies with countries like Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And if you take a look at the technology and innovation in these countries, it's helping their economy grow better, it's helping their economy, they are raising the bar for economic and innovation and technology production. Most other countries rely, especially countries with developing economies, they rely on these countries to actually provide basic innovation and technology, which actually helps these countries. However, Nigeria is home to one of the weakest intellectual property protection regimes, which hampers growth perspective of our already weak economy. IP violation hinders economic growth by discouraging investments, decreasing innovations, discouraging research, and diminishing financial benefits from creation, and may boost harm to consumers. The strongest tool to actually restore Nigeria intellectual property is protection and enforcement of these legislations and policies to prioritize intellectual property protection. And how we can allow intellectual property to thrive is if we should amend our laws to meet with the advancements of today's world. Continuation, intellectual property promotes innovation and healthy market competition. As I said earlier, if these companies are getting back profits, if they're getting back incentive of what they produce, they will be encouraged to produce more, and it will benefit consumers, it will benefit the society, which ends up benefiting the economy at large. It attracts inward foreign direct investments, which will benefit the economy. Foreign direct investment is an investment in the form of a controlling ownership in a business, sorry. Let me take that again. Foreign direct investment is an investment in the form of a controlling ownership in a business in one country by an entity based on another country. There are countries, there are companies in which are not created in Nigeria, in which the owners are not made in Nigeria, but are controlled by someone outside Nigeria. Take, for instance, MTN is not a Nigeria-based company, but they have a company. They have various companies in Nigeria. They have various companies in Nigeria, and which helps and develops their own economy and benefits the economy. It increases tax revenue and creates employment and job opportunities. Intellectual property rights are protected. This would help the government by creating more tax revenue. The government will be able to tax more on these companies if they're gaining more money, if they're getting more money, and it will turn out to benefit the economy. And it's also provide employment and job opportunity, thereby canceling the problem of lack of job opportunities everywhere. It gives room for improved economic policies and institutional reforms. More economic policies can come in which would benefit the government and institutional reforms that will benefit the countries can actually come in. It strengthens economic interaction and competition between countries. Countries will be able to interact together, and both countries can actually gain more money. For instance, MTN is in Nigeria, but MTN is not a Nigerian company, and MTN as a country is benefiting both Nigeria and in which the country in which MTN is originally based. Intellectual property protection plays a catalytic role in inspiring research and development in a country. If people are inspired to create more, if people actually get profits and incentives for the economy from the innovations they create, they would inspire to research more, to create more, to dig deeper, and this will end up in developing the economy. Say, for instance, the people that developed the vaccine for COVID-19, how much they will benefit from this and how much it would help the economy. In conclusion, as the saying goes, every advantage has a disadvantage. While we are convinced that the benefits of intellectual property on the economy outweigh the disadvantages to a large extent, we are also mindful of the set disadvantages such as exploitation and monopoly. Intellectual property basically gives rights. Intellectual property law basically gives rights to the original creation to own all rights on this innovation, on this product, and they have the rights to either share it, either licenses, either share their rights to other people to create more. And some people would be selfish not to license some people would be adamant to license their rights to other companies to make or create more, in which would create monopoly. This will not be good for the economy if just one person is creating products that is very useful, that is really asked for in the economy, both resulting mostly from the exclusive grants of patents to a patency. Intellectual properties by their respective categories are and have always been a source of enrichment to the economy. What is left is to strengthen intellectual property laws in the economy for better economic process, as intellectual property is an integral part of the economy and neither is complete without the other. Intellectual property laws should be amended, should be strengthened in order for our economy in Nigeria to progress, to raise higher, to be part of the developed economic in the world. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that detailed presentation. So we'll move on to group 4, if they're ready for their presentation. Group 4, if you are ready, kindly unmute and make your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Please, you have 7 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. I hope Mr. Usman is online to help us with the sharing of the screen.
Good evening. Sorry, I can't share the screen right now because the other participant's screen is still on.
Okay.
Okay, so you can just proceed while you try to share your screen.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Temitope Isaac Olani. I'm representing Group 4. And quickly, I'll just go over to the overview of what we refer to as intellectual property. Well, according to the New Oxford American Dictionary, intellectual property is defined to mean a work or invention that is a result of creativity, such as a manuscript or a design to which one has rights and for which one may apply for patent, copyrights, or trademark, etc. Well, for us, intellectual property generally refers to creations of the mind, such as inventions, literary and artistic works, designs and symbols, names and images used in business. IP is the legal rights conferred on those who invest in creative and inventive promotional activities resulting in original, useful, or beneficial outputs. The protection of intellectual property is to meet the twin objectives of protecting the interests of owners and creators of intellectual works on one hand, and promoting promoting public interest on the other hand. Now, the types of intellectual property, just like many of the presenters have identified today, they include copyright, which is the rights of creators of literary and artistic works, including music, photography, designs, graphic designs, and the likes. The rights of the creators to restrict other people from copying their creations is basically what is referred to as copyright. Patents, the rights is the rights given to innovators in technological and scientific works to have their inventions protected and exploited for a reasonable period of time, according to the law of each country. Industrial designs, they are the ornamental and physical attributes of a product, which makes them distinguishable from other products in the market. Trademarks, they are marks that they could become marks or names or whatever appellation that is attached to a product that distinguishes it from other products in the market as well, that makes it distinguishable. Geographical indications, they are products or services produced in a setting that is produced in a particular geographical location that has certain attributes which make those products or services unique to that particular geographical location or society. Trade secrets, the economic and processes of production of a product or service that is unique and that is basically not known to the public, which gives the owner of such information certain economic advantages over their other competitors. TCEs or TKs, known as traditional cultural expressions and traditional knowledge, they are also a specific information or a way of doing things or way of life that is unique to a particular location or a particular geographical location, which can almost only be found in that particular location, and which is also sought to be protected by the owners of that cultural information or heritage. Performance rights, which is very, very linked to copyrights. They are simply the rights of performers of certain literary artistic works to have their performances protected and not to be copied by other people. Unfair competition, which is a variant of many of these property rights that we have listed, is simply the right to restrict other people from unjustly or unjustifiably exploiting the right to use creations that other people have invested money or research in producing. Now we go to the benefits of IP to the economy. Just like many of the speakers have noted, intellectual property as a form of intangible assets can be seen all around us. It's in the goods and services that we purchase. There's a fair amount of creativity and innovation that accompanies those products and services. Excuse me. Now, these creative efforts distinguish one's product or service from another, and this distinction leads to promotion and marketing of these products such that the owners of the business can make substantial returns on the investment they put in to making their products appealing or desirable to consumers. Therefore, intellectual property plays a major role in the economy as protection of IP rights, sustain and promote economic growth, while also encouraging new innovation and creativity for development of new products and or improvements to existing ones. The protection of intellectual property in an economy also encourages foreign direct investment. This is because foreign investors will be more willing to invest in an economy where there is an IP regime that affords them protection of their IP rights, and this in turn boosts the portfolios of those businesses, thereby increasing the GDP of a nation. Also, IP helps generate breakthrough solutions to global challenges, which is a good example is that of the vaccines that have been developed in many countries of the world now, and which have been patented by the creators of those breakthrough inventions. We know the benefits of intellectual property, which is that IP goes a long way in increasing market value and creating and generating revenue. It creates and supports high-paying jobs, which leads to reduction of unemployment. Strong IP rights helps the consuming public make educated choices about safety, reliability, and effectiveness of their purchases. Intellectual property also encourages innovation and reward entrepreneurs as it incentivizes them to keep pushing for new advances in the face of adversity. It also discourages people. So one of the disadvantages, one of the disadvantages, or some of the disadvantages of not exploring IP to the economy include discouraging people or creators or innovators from being innovative, as there will be no reward for creativity, or in that would there be a protection. There would definitely be loss of revenue. Foreign investors would tend to stay away from investing in an economy where IP rights are not protected. The general public will not have access to inventions and creations and information that are necessary for economic development. And also, this would tend to diminish financial benefits from creations. Now, the challenges that we believe are facing development of IP, especially in Nigeria, includes lack of awareness and sensitization on protection of IP rights. IP rights are also not properly and adequately enforced. Outdated laws and regulations that affect the protection of some certain subject matter. For example, in Nigeria, plants and animal varieties are not yet patentable despite the economic benefits. And lack of government investment of public funds in research and development activities, as well as issues with common infringement like piracy and counterfeiting. Our recommendations include the enforcement of IP rights and criminalization of infringing acts, amendment of laws and regulations that are not in sync with the recent global development and making of laws that prioritize IP protection, investment and creation of public funds to assist research and development activities in the economy, creation of special tribunals to hear and determine IP-related matters, and lastly, introduction of educative IP seminars to insensitize IP owners on the protection of their rights and making IP a compulsory course in tertiary institutions. That will be the end of our presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you so much, Temitope, for that presentation. We'll go ahead to Group 5 for their presentation. Is Group 5 ready? Please kindly unmute and make your presentation. Group 5, is Group 5 ready?
Yes, we are ready.
Okay, please kindly make your presentation. You have 7 minutes to do that. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ayotunde Abiodun, and I represent Group 5, and the topic for discussion is intellectual property and the economy. So I'll be starting off with the definition of intellectual property. Intellectual property refers to intangible creations of the mind. It can be an invention, a design, a brand name, or a literary and artistic work. Today, all over the world, businesses bombard us with new ideas, discoveries, innovation, which is disrupting various sectors and societal boundaries. Hence, there's a need for a well-organized system to protect and reward the intangible assets, which are disrupting the various sectors in our world today. It's interesting to note that the modern concept of intellectual property developed in England in the 17th and 18th century. And the term intellectual property began to be used in the 19th century, though it was not until the late 20th century that intellectual property became commonplace in majority of our world system today. Next slide, please. So going on to the purpose of intellectual property. The main purpose of intellectual property is to allow creators or the originators of new ideas to own their creations and to ensure that other people too can come out to create things and they will know that they are protected. So to achieve this, the law gives people and businesses property rights to the information and intellectual goods they created, and usually for a limited period of time. So this also gives economic incentive for their creation because it allows people to benefit from the information and the intellectual goods they create and allows them to protect their ideas and prevent other people from copying these ideas. This way, people cannot profit from their innovations. Also, intellectual property seeks to protect investors, designers, creatives, developers, authors, and so on. They affords them the opportunity to protect the ideas they have developed, either by means of patent, copyright, or copyright. Also, without the protection of these ideas or inventions, businesses and individuals will not reap the full benefit of their inventions. And this will lead to a situation whereby people are not willing to be innovative, talk more of carrying out research or development. Next slide, please. So moving on to the types of intellectual property. Intellectual property can consist of many types of intangible assets, and this includes patent, trademarks, copyright, and trade secrets. A patent is a property right for an inventor that is typically granted by a government agency, giving the owner the right to exclude others from making, using, selling, offering to sell, and importing an invention for a limited period of time in exchange for the public disclosure of the invention. So such invention must fulfill three main requirements. First, it has to be new. Second, it must not be obvious. And third, there needs to be an industrial applicability of such invention. Moving on to a trademark. A trademark is a recognizable sign, design, or expression which distinguishes products or services of a particular trader from similar product or services of other traders. A major example here is the logo and the brand name of Coca-Cola. Next slide, please. Moving on to copyright. A copyright protects the creator of an original work, and gives it exclusive right to it. And this is also for a limited time. Majorly under this category, you have the authors of book who have their works copyrighted. We also have musical artists. They fall under this category. So a copyright states that original creators can grant authorization through a licensing agreement to use the work. So finally, I'll touch on a trade secret. So a trade secret is a formula, a practice, process, design, or instrument which is not generally known or reasonable as ascertainable, by which a business can obtain an economic advantage over competitors and customers. So trade secret must be actively protected by the company and are typically the results of a company's research and development. So examples of trade secret could be a design, a pattern, a recipe, a formula, or a virtual process. So ideally, trade secret is just something that gives an organization economic advantage over over competitors, basically. Next slide, please. So now to the crux of the matter, and that's intellectual property and its relevance to the economy. So there are a number of ways through which intellectual property protects and benefits the economy. So basically, sectors that rely on intellectual property most times represent a significant part of developed and developing countries in terms of GDP, which is the gross domestic product, that is the total value of goods and services produced in such countries. Also, it promotes innovation. When a well-structured intellectual property within the country, it puts innovation, people will be eager to innovate, come up with new ideas for them because they know that innovations protect and people cannot copy them and profit off their innovations. Also, intellectual property protection helps the small and medium enterprises. And it's interesting to know that the small and medium enterprises make up a large percentage of any economy in the world. Next slide, please. Also, intellectual property protection benefits consumers and the society. So it helps provide consumers with innovative products and services in virtually every area of life, and it protects them from counterfeited or pirated products. Also, the intellectual property has the ability to influence investments. Intellectual property, a well-structured intellectual property regime will help attract foreign direct investment and provide the necessary conditions for the transfer of technology. And this is really evident in number of investors from Europe and Africa that are investing directly in tech startups in Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the capital hub for technology now in the world. Also, intellectual property facilitates the transfer of technology into the country. So we'll go to touch on the challenges to intellectual property in Nigeria. The IP regime in Nigeria has a lot of challenges, and these challenges have hindered the growth and development of intellectual property in the country. So one of such challenges is the fact that there's a lack of proper sensitization on the benefits that could be gotten from intellectual property protection. Most individuals do not understand intellectual property and they go ahead to make mistakes that can cost them. However, we all know that the law says that ignorance is not an excuse, and such persons will have to face the consequences that way. Also, there's the absence of educative IP seminars for potential intellectual property owners, and there are not really a lot of courses on intellectual property in the curriculum of Nigerian universities. Majority of our universities do not really have intellectual property as a compulsory course, rather some have them as electives. And this in the long run has a lot of negative effect on the economy and on Nigeria at large. So that's why we are appreciative of This internship program organized by Juliana Imam Intellectual Property and Creative Consult, and it's obviously going a long way to expose students to the intricacy of IP, and this has the effect of helping the Nigerian economy in the long run. Next slide, please. So finally, in conclusion, from what I've said so far and what every other group has reiterated, is very much saying that intellectual property is advantageous to the digital economy we currently live in, and this does not rule out the disadvantages. This disadvantage, as pointed out in Nigeria, is the fact that our regime is not well protected. And so, yeah, that ends my presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Ayotunde. Thank you to all the group representatives who have presented today. Unfortunately, Group 2 cannot go on with their presentation for today. They're having some difficulties, so we'll just proceed. So we'll move on to our mentors now to give brief comments on the topic of discussion, which is intellectual property and the economy. So we'll begin with Mr. Folarin. So Mr. Folarin is a legal practitioner and partner in Truman Rockwood Solicitors. He's a director at the Intellectual Property Institute of Nigeria, and is a past chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association Abuja branch. He's a thought leader on innovation, intellectual property, and entertainment law in Nigeria. So sir, you are welcome. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program. So you have 10 minutes to add to the discussion, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, seriously, and once again, well done, Juliana, for this new installment of the internship program. I also say congrats to the mentees, who have come on board. This is a fantastic opportunity. It's a new type of platform, I guess, in this space. I would encourage you to, make the best, take advantage and make the best use of this opportunity. Permit me again for being off cam. Yes, today is an off work day. So I think I should commend the groups for the quality of the presentations that they have put up. I think all the issues were sounded well researched, and for the time space, you touched on many issues. I would really like to react to issues raised, I think, in the course of the presentations, but rather than go group by group, I think I noticed something like a general trend that cut across. So I might just try quickly to respond to some of the to some things that I think are general trends or observations. I think that first of all, every country, every society any conversation on intellectual property, in my opinion, should commence with the realization that every society has to find a way to protect and to incentivize innovation. And what that essentially means is that innovation is change. We say the only thing that is constant is change, which is a paradox. But people innovate in every society. I was reading. I have a huge interest in African innovation, and I'm a little bit of a historian. So I was reading that Africans were one of the first. Let's say we were one of the first to discover soap, caustic soap. And that's why you find our black soap is so effective. It's sold everywhere, across the world today. And we're using black soap, caustic soap, at a time when Europe, didn't use soap, hadn't discovered the proper formulation for soap that could kill bacteria, at the rates that our own black soap could. It's an innovation, or it's innovative. So on the one hand, we've always had innovation in Africa, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And if you look at, the history of Africa, and how the migration or how people moved from, Northern Africa down to towards the south, to West Africa and Central Africa, you find that culture also moved along with the migration of people. So Egypt, in Egypt, they mastered, or in ancient Egypt, they mastered how to heat iron, to a point where it could be soldered and welded, and then used to create all manner of sculptures. Now, why is that important? It's important because, that translates to the ability to create metal works, and then sophisticated tools, weapons, ammunition, and so on and so forth. Now, you find similarities in the technologies that were used, in ancient Egypt down here in sub-Saharan Africa, or what you may call the Sahel. Now, why am I saying all of this? The idea that we should realize that we've always had innovation. The question now is, what steps do we need to take as a society to protect and to incentivize our innovation? And to that extent, there are two general arguments, two broad arguments. There's a group that says, oh, you need money, so the incentive is financial in nature. There are others who believe that creators are not always motivated by financial gain or profit, and these are, I think, the two main. There are a couple of other schools of thought in between, but the idea of using intellectual property as the framework, for protection of quote unquote intellectual exertion, is a fairly recent idea. When I say fairly recent, I mean, we're talking about maybe about 400 years. It's fairly recent. But that is not to say that in Africa we don't recognize the need for, or the significance of ideas. I think to a very large extent, and I think it was Group 3 who spoke about traditional knowledge. I think to a very large extent, those who were the keepers of traditional knowledge in Africa were very selfish with their knowledge. And that again comes down to how can a society create a set of rules that will ensure that this knowledge is, there's an incentive to share it, and then it is also available. So there's some kind of balancing act, that the law would play in that scenario. So you find a situation where, when I say they were selfish, the Baba, we've lost a lot of traditional knowledge because, again, there was not much writing done. A lot of it was transmitted orally, and those people, the custodians of this culture and of these traditions, of this knowledge, have passed on to the great beyond without sharing their knowledge. And I was reading a book the other day, it was Awolowo's autobiography. And Awolowo said that in the early 20th century and the late 19th century, that we had medicine men, Babalawos, in southwest Nigeria. The Babalawos were tasked to, cure issues, interface with the gods and all whatnot. And when there was an epidemic, the Babalawos had the responsibility of, either appeasing the gods and whatever. If they could do that successfully, they were praised and they were given prime position. If they were unsuccessful, guess what would happen? They would be killed. The people would kill them. The Babalawo would either be exiled or banished or killed. And I think at the turn of the early 1900s, 1904, between 1904 and 1906, there was a major smallpox epidemic in southwest Nigeria that killed a lot of people. And there were several instances where some of these priests, would offer, do the sacrifices, but they would also use these local herbs, to attempt to cure the smallpox. Now, fast forward to 2021, in between 1900 and 2020, for example, as a random time allocation, you've had all sorts of discoveries, discovery of all sorts of vaccines, penicillin and so on and so forth. Now, where are the African remedies or the African solutions to some of these common problems? The other day my daughter had, some years ago when she was born, my daughter had cradle cap, and my mom and my wife's mom, they got some leaves, boiled the leaves, applied it to her scalp, and the cradle cap, in less than a week, she was giving birth to. Her doctors were not Nigerian, so they were all surprised. They said, "Oh, how did you do it? Where did you get it from? Blah blah blah." And we showed them the leaf, and they took it to study. The point is, there's innovation. We have innovation. We are innovative. That is that question is not in doubt. The question now is, what conversations do we need to have as a country, to come up with a system that will properly incentivize, protect, and then ensure access to this knowledge or this innovation. And so very, very quickly, and so that for me is number one. That I think is the main task of intellectual property law in Nigeria in 2021. How do we balance, these three concerns? With regards to protection of traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expression, I think we have our laws are not. I heard one other recurrent theme I heard was that our laws are old and outmoded. Our laws are not too old. Yes, they are old, but the truth is that in Nigeria we have enough laws to address some of the problems that we have. Most of the problems that we have, and the problem is that we don't enforce the laws, and we don't use the laws. Simple question: how many in all the copyright suits or the trademark actions, patents and design suits that that have gone through the court system, how many of them, have really tested the real substantive issues in any of these laws? Very few. Most of them are surface. We just scratch the surface. We barely even go below, below the surface, and that's a big issue. Recently, we filed an action. We got a judgment, and it was for traditional cultural expression of what? Of Bata, the song and the dance. And I was lead counsel in the case, and we got the judgment from a customary court, and that judgment has kind of sparked a huge debate. I was told recently that somebody applied to the court from some university down south. I was told by a member of the LLM class, 2021 LLM class in Gwagwalada, that they're currently studying it as one of their coursework or discussion sessions or whatever. But the idea that we don't have the systems, whether or not you agree or whether you don't, that's a different kettle of fish. But the idea that we don't have systems to protect our TK and TCE, is very untrue. We have customary courts. Our customary courts today have practically been turned into matrimonial causes, customary law, marriage, dissolution, and custody affirmation courts. But the purpose of the customary court is to protect customary law, and traditional cultural expressions and traditional knowledge are part of customary law, even though there are some components of TK, when you talk about folklore, that are actually protected under the Copyright Act. But that's a different kettle of fish entirely. It relates to the artistic and the artistic expressions of our cultural heritage. So I think we need to be a little more creative as IP people in addressing these old issues that are being presented as new, and then some of the new challenges to the new challenges to old problems. And why is this important? I think it's very important because if you study Hollywood, the story, the trajectory of Hollywood in terms of storytelling, has almost gone full circle, in the sense that most of the characters and the stories that they tell, the blockbuster movies that were taken from the West, have almost been spent. If you're talking about numbers, the two highest grossing movies of all time are movies and stories about Africa. Black Panther and what's the other one? Both Disney productions, Lion King. Of all time, Lion King has spawned, all manner of spawned series, several series, all sorts of brand merchandising and so on and so forth. Musically, they have been gold, literally, or even oil, blood money, and that says a lot. It says that there's a rich tapestry, that can be taken from African culture. But then the question is, what can we do as Africans to ensure that our culture is not taken, repackaged or repurposed, and then sold back to us the way other resources such as oil, natural minerals, etc., are extracted, processed, and then sold back to us at a premium. So I think those are the questions that we need to ask ourselves. And then more importantly, how then do we get our own local storytellers, our local creators, inventors, to leverage on these technologies and these assets that we have? And again, like I said, I think we can be very creative in the way we go about it. Somebody mentioned high cost of registration as one of the problems attendant to protection of IP in Nigeria. I don't think so. I think that was group one. Nigeria has one of the lowest filing fees in the world. If you're talking about patents, designs, trademarks, our fees are one of the lowest. Even company registration until very recently, we have the lowest fees. Copyright, of course, is registration fees, formality free. But even the notification to one of the lowest registration fees in the world. So that's not necessarily a challenge. I think the big challenge is that one, the knowledge and the acceptance is very low. Let me know when my time is almost up with services. The knowledge and acceptance, what's that?
Your time is up, sir. So you just take a 2 minutes to round up, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So knowledge is very low. Acceptance is extremely low, especially among creators, and that's a big issue. Another thing I would like to just throw as a poser, I said every society has come up with a system to protect innovation. So my question is IP the only way? Let's say the Statute of Anne was not passed, back then. And remember, it started as a way to ensure that certain people could print. It was related to printing, the print industry. But is IP as a concept beyond? Of course, we know there's copyright, copyleft. You have the Creative Commons. Africans have a communal approach to property, whether it's real property or other types of property. So I think that's a question we should ask ourselves. Then someone touched on the rise of international companies. I think to round up, I would say it would be good to think about what the issues that are on the front burner of international conversations around IP today. And I think streaming is a big issue because traditional modes of distribution have changed, blah, blah, blah. But all in all, I would say well done. Group 1 raised fantastic issues. Group 3 and Group 4, good stuff. It'll be good probably over the course of next week to interrogate some of these issues. And I'm very happy to join you guys to do that. Thank you very much. Well done.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Folari Naluko. So if you are listening to Mr. Folari, you know that 10 minutes is not enough for him to do justice. So we're sorry for the limited time, sir. We know that we'll have such opportunities to always hear from you. So the next speaker is Mr. Nosakare Wadia Esquire. He's the managing partner, G Law Firm, Lagos, Nigeria, legal advisor, corporate and commercial lawyer. He's the founder of IP radio station, Nigeria's premier intellectual property radio station, and the convener of premier IP workshop on advertising and media in Nigeria, the Nigeria International Intellectual Property Conference. He is a media, advertising, and integrated communications expert, a business developer and business growth strategist, and he has certifications in media enterprise from the School of Media and Communication from the Atlantic University in Lagos, Nigeria. He has also obtained certificate in law business management from Strictly Law Business Academy. So Mr. Nosa Owadia, you're welcome to the program. We're glad to have you, sir.
Thank you.
10 minutes to add to the discussion, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Juliana. Thank you, all the organizers. It's indeed a privilege to be on this platform to share knowledge and to give back. I don't know if you can hear me clearly. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes,
we can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Okay, so I would focus more on that aspect, which I think is IP as an industry, as a business. So we have a lot of moving parts in that. You have the practice, you have the stakeholders, you have the government, you have the policy makers. But I'll narrow it down to the topic, which basically says IP and economy. I would also want to expand it a bit to cover IP and economic development. So I'll focus more on the business side. I've listened to all the presentations, and I can say that they are very, very brilliant. But for some of us, I think one of the groups tried to get into it a bit, but somehow maybe they did not have the courage to push that envelope. But one of the greatest problems we've always had with IP as an instrument or as a tool or as an enabler, probably as a major player in the Nigerian economy, is that when we discuss IP most of the time, in my view, we try to run away from the economic, let me say the business aspect. I mean, tying it to the brass tacks. Because the truth is that if we don't begin to tie IP to numbers, actual numbers, we're going to keep having issues as to how IP really, the economic functionality. You will discover that the recession has made it so challenging that anything that does not hit the bottom line directly, people run away from it. Even lawyers run away from it. Unfortunately for us, intellectual property is that aspect of law that sits with all 4 legs or maybe 8 legs or whatever into the economy. It's such that you can't really talk about economic development without intellectual property. So I want to move. IP is ubiquitous, which means that it permeates every area of human endeavor, especially things that have to do with economic activity. You can't discuss an economy of a nation looking at the GDP. And that is one of the things I want to bring to bear to those who presented. Fantastic job. But one of the key things, I did not see money in your presentation. I like to see money. I like to see where the money is. I like to see how is IP crawling around the economy? What role does it play in particular industry? So I'll just make my presentation possible, pointing out with some statistics why I think that IP plays a key role and the areas you should be looking at, especially as you gravitate towards taking a proper career in IP and making your career now and in the future. The GDP basically will be the expenditure spent on final goods and services produced in a country within a stipulated time. So when you talk about the GDP of Nigeria, you are talking about with a framework of some years or a framework of a particular year. So the GDP, like I said, GDP. What is the size of the Nigerian economy? We are talking about operates in the economy. So what is the size of this economy we are talking about in Nigeria? In terms of GDP, as of 2020, Nigeria's GDP was 32.30 billion USD. As at the first end of the second quarter of this year, Nigerian GDP was at 41 billion USD. It's defeated South Africa's GDP. South African GDP is about 329. Kenya's GDP is about 106. So Nigeria gave you the biggest market in Africa. And we have about 200 million people. So we have a big population. But the question is that how much role does IP play in all this industry? What are the roles IP play for it to be able to evaluate IP and the economy? But let's look at the main drivers of the economy in quarter 2, 2020. The main drivers are trade, telecoms, transportation, electricity, crop production, and manufacturing and oil. Which of these sectors can we really say IP is frontal? In any of these things, the only ones that I think IP is even doing anything at all is probably trade and telecom. But in electricity, how many people are looking at IP? Even in agriculture that the government is touting, how many IP are we having there? How many IP activities that we have in there? So you discover that even in our business sector that galvanizes the economy, the things that make the economic wheel turn around, you discover that IP is not really playing so much role. And we are saying that the economy is supposed to grow by 1.5% in 2021, maybe 2.9% in 2022. If you are going to link IP to those developments, you are going to have to look at how IP can function in those economies. I'd like to look at those key industries because of time. I want to jump to those key industries that would enable IP, that will be more, that we need IP for essentially in Nigeria. Just because of the fact that every country has its own unique, what I call unique selling points. In Nigeria, the key industries that work so much for us is the pharmaceuticals, even though it's been hit badly by the recession. But you still discover that we do a lot of pharmaceutical business in Nigeria. As of 2018, the pharmaceutical business was 666 million USD. And there's a projection that is going to go to 698 million USD. Information and technology, we already know that we are playing there. And that also seems to form part of what is driving in this second quarter. I mean, the second quarter that went by. One big industry we can grow IP in, but which, like Mr. Polari said, later, is the creative and entertainment industry. In fact, the IMF described Nollywood as the second biggest employer of labor. By 2016, 139 billion of Nigerian GDP was attributed to the film. The music industry alone is worth more than 39 billion USD. But so how many of these get registered? How many musicians register? How many creative people register? How many creative people get licenses, just appropriate their IP. So, I mean, come and do any form of regulation. It's not as if the economy really, it cannot really do a lot for us people. But the truth is that a lot of people that are supposed to appropriate and get their IP into the proper frame of institution, there's much apathy. Some people will say it's lack of awareness, level is very low. But even among the industries that are aware, how many of them are actually? The textile industry and the garment industry is a big area. The fashion industry all over the world, Nigeria not exclusive, is a big industry. But nobody is really doing much there. So how can there be economic development? How can IP impact on the economy when a lot of designs are being done every day, backyard, front, everywhere? Nobody is touching them. Then the consumer goods, I mean, we have mentioned it, anti-counterfeiting, gray market. Those things as if the economy is running on a loose, and IP is a major role in that area. How many of us have valued our IP? How many of us have valued? You'll discover that even Apple, as of today, Apple's trademark is about $263.38 billion. Amazon is about 54 USD billions. Google is about 191. Do we know the value of Dangote? Do we know the value of any of the brands? If we cannot amortize and if we don't know the value of the that we have in our country, how can we say that IP is? So I would want the mentees to begin to look at IP not just as an abstract. IP has gone beyond abstract or codification or in terms of, like Barrister Fulani said, we've not even explored our laws at all. That is in my own, not explored the opportunities that our laws even itself present. I hear people talk about artificial intelligence, open source, and all that. There's nothing wrong with that, but even the ones that we have that are traditional to us, the ones that we find all over around us, we have not been able to appropriate the intellectual property. I'll just round up to say that with some WIPO figures that say that in 2000 do you know that in Nigeria, for example, in Nigeria, the application, the patent application in Nigeria, the filing for Nigeria in 2018 was 153. Trademark was 11,883, 11,000. Industrial designs was 1 plus. In 2019, there was no patent filed at all. Trademarks was just about 14, and industrial design nil. And this has to do with filings, whether local and abroad. You see that we are innovative. And like so many seminars I've had, people say Nigeria is not really innovative. We are innovative, we are not filing. We are innovative, we are not innovative. So how can IP now play a major role? Just suppose that with China. China's patent application alone in 2000 was 1.400 million. The US patent was 621,000. Japan was 3 marks through the same thing. China champion globally, 607,833. I don't want to bore you with statistics, but what we are saying is that the indices show economic development, filing of patents, trademarks, and every other thing, because that is how those are the institutional frameworks for trapping how a country. It's not that you show somebody on China's television pushing a truck around and he says he has innovated. That is not innovation as far as I'm concerned. No proper IP has come to that for the society to be able to amortize the benefit. these innovations are being done in an institutional way, they are being registered, they are being noted, and the economy is able to benefit from it. As far as I'm concerned, in my view, IP is not likely to take the pride of praise. Unfortunately, it permeates every area of life. Every facet of our life has IP in it, but we need to push the frontiers more. So I want the mentees to look beyond a lot of things that have been written. Quite nice. I mean, one of the groups talk about gaming and all that stuff. Beautiful. But I am saying that let's make haste slowly. Let's first appropriate the benefits that we have. Let's exploit them to the fullest. Let's grow those industries that are traditional to us, the entertainment, the textile. Let's get IP involved in all those things. And by the time you see those things coming up very energized, you will see that the economy will begin to blossom and IP will function more in the GDP. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Nosa, for that great insights and for even giving us insight on the statistics of IP in Nigeria as well. So moving forward, we'll also have Rita Anwiri as one of the mentors to comment today. Rita is an intellectual property and information technology lawyer from Nigeria. And in September 2021, she was listed as a leading Nigerian woman in business law by Esquire Legal Practice magazine. She won the 2021 Young Legal Professional Award of Excellence and was listed as one of the 2020 WIPR Influential Women of Intellectual Property Trailblazer. She provides advisory, advocacy, and transactional legal services to a broad spectrum of local and foreign clients. She has cognate experience in projects concerning data protection and privacy, media law, copyright, trademarks, and patents. Rita holds a master's degree in intellectual property and information technology from the University of Derby, UK. And she's a member of the NBA section on Business Law Committee on Arbitration and Alternative Dispute Resolution, Information and Communication Technology, and Intellectual Property. She's also a member of the National Institute of Management and an associate member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, UK, Nigerian branch. She's a current PRO for the Port Harcourt chapter and a pro tem secretary of the Young Members Group. She's a PRO of the NBA Young Lawyers Forum Port Harcourt branch. And Rita is also a co-contributor to the 6th edition of the International Comparative Legal Guide on Data Protection 2019, and has published an article with the Trademark Lawyer magazine titled How Artists Can Commercialize and Exploit Their Intellectual Property. She has a podcast called IP Series on Anchor, which is also distributed on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public Pocket Cast, and Breaker, with a Twitter series where she talks about intellectual property and a blog post on Subtrack. She also has a group for lawyers called Building a Community, who meet weekly to network and have conversations on various topics ranging from career, relationship to things happening globally, and also a group called IP Hub for IP enthusiasts. She is the chief convener of the Intellectual Property Society of Nigeria. In her spare time, Rita enjoys traveling, listening to music, watching movies and series, especially South Korean, and tutoring. So thank you very much, Rita. We are glad to have you on the program today. You have 10 minutes, please, for your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. Of this, the 4th quarter of the mentorship program. I would like to say the groups, group 1, 3, 4, and 5. I wish actually, presented, and I'd also like to appreciate my Mr. Folarin and Mr. Nosa, whose contribution summed up everything that the groups had presented. So my own few I thought we we're going to actually ask the group's question, but since we will not be doing that, I'll just contribution in regards to the topic IP and economy. So before this event and even while the event was going, I did, readings, and I came across a very interesting post where someone said, if you usually do yoga, someone said yoga originated from Yoruba. Shocked because the perception is that yoga is an Indian exercise. And another person said someone made $1 billion from research on Africa intellectual property works, and I was like, okay. So that goes to show that if we as Nigerians or as Africans begin to take what we have, there's a lot of potentials in there. So first off, when you talk about I have to look at the sectors that actually contribute to the growth of the economy and create jobs, boost the GDP of the country. I would like to appreciate Mr. Nosa for the start and the data, which was very helpful, because one thing I've noticed is we don't like to document and we don't like to put out correct data out there. We either just assume or come up with imaginary figures at the end of the day. So these sectors which actually contribute to the economy should be helped by the government, by the stakeholders. There's also a bit of like Mr. Folarin said, when we're not ready to train ourselves, like get the knowledge when it comes to IP or even accept IP. So we had the stakeholders meeting in relation to the startup bill that has been going around, and one of the presenters, who happens to be a tech founder, comments in relation to one of the provisions in the startup, which said we're going to a one-stop shop where startups and tech owners and founders can, do registration, inclusive of IP registration. And he goes to say, why do I have to do IP registration? And I couldn't hold myself during the meeting. I just had to take the mic and make a few comments like, why would you not want to take advantage of your intangible asset, which is your intellect? They have a code in their association which is build, put it out there. If it's maybe you don't get good feedback, you go back and rebuild. And I'm like, that's some work on and sell to someone else who would actually reinvent it and show you the potential, to show that we as individuals are not even ready to take advantage of IP when it comes to contributing to developing our economy. Issues on infrastructures. I know one of the groups had talked on creating policies for GI. So I do know for a fact that there's a technical working group working on a policy for Nigeria in collaboration with EU to come up with a draft before next month, and also have a conference, I think on the 30th, on geographical indication. So that's something that I think we also need to take a note of. Then I did come across one of the, I can't remember the group now, but talked on taxing, how IP can also contribute through tax intellectual properties, how they can contribute to the growth of an economy. And we know that last year we had this reaction from the public when they said the Lagos states had created a tax for content developers, taxing audiovisual songs and videos, and people were very strange. So I know in one of my researches, I had come across a post where they said if the owner of an IP is dead and the family has to get that IP, you have to pay a certain percentage in for tax to the I know the Michael Jackson case also came out, I think this year, where he had to pay some tax. Then his family, the late priest family as well, they took the tax money out. They were going to be left notice. Those are things that we also need to consider when creating this that should enable and also foster growth in terms of developing our economy. They have R&D, research and development. We don't do a lot of that. Education. Okay. Universities don't do a lot of research. That's why you see that our schools are always going on strikes, because we rely so much on the government when it comes to funding. If we have the universities, doing a lot of research in, looking for grounds to break, I'm sure that we can, also put Nigeria on the map when it comes to IP development, because last year we're basically on lockdown and everyone wasn't doing anything. But then everyone was basically waiting for the Western scientists to come up with a vaccine. How many Nigerians or how many Africans did come up with a vaccine? I know there was this traditional herb that I can't remember Malaysia or so, but an African country was making suggestions that if you take the herb, you would feel a lot better, and people were questioning the government. Why would you suggest our own product at the day? Then we have issues on misappropriation. So if I, as a Nigerian, use in an African content and they decide to commercialize or monopolize it, I won't get any backlash. But when you find a foreigner or a Westerner decides to use a product, then the conversations of misappropriation comes into place and everyone starts to make a lot of comment. We saw that in the trademark case. It was a Nigerian that was actually going to trademark Yoruba stars, but because a foreigner had Yoruba, she decided to bring it to the social media where a lot of people would make their comments. Then another thing that I wanted to talk about would be creating a Nigerian and African standard when it comes to IP and development, when dealing with creatives or innovators. I feel like most of our agreements or treaties are too westernized. We end up signing these agreements without looking at whether they are fit for purpose for our environment. Thankfully, we have the IP protocol on after, but then what are those benefits? What are we going to benefit from having African IP structure? Are there policies in place? Are there structures in place that would aid and make people take make people take IP seriously? So I'm seeing the question, I say, what are the roles of the government plays? So when it comes to IP and foreign direct investments, our intellectual property rights how do I put it now? So it's not strong enough to bring in investors, but if you can show that, if the investors or we, the citizens, can show that there's going to be a lot of knowledge exchange at the end of the day and end up building capacity, local, and focusing on exporting our talents or importing the knowledge that we get. I think that's also going to go a long way in terms of developing our economy. You also have issues in relation to tech transfer, also licensing too. Also consider how the brands or creatives or the innovators we have, position themselves in a way that lets people know that even though, like Mr. Fuller, they're outdated but not so outdated, we do have laws. Because you get this conversation where people say that are too backward, their laws are not fit for purpose. But then you can always find the loopholes in our aid your argument and also contribute in setting precedents and also contribute to the growth of our economy at the end of the day. Then I also want to talk on education in terms of educating not just the creators, also our stakeholders, also creating a platform that gives creative content developers an avenue to generate. So now we have a lot of social media influencers in Nigeria, which has spiked in the last 1 year, COVID. But there are there IP laws, or are there provisions or structures put in place to, make the influencers comply with the laws we have in Nigeria? It's not just saying that we don't have those laws, but then what are they actually doing? Do we really need to regulate the content that they put out there? Is there a healthy environment for competitions amongst the influencers, the brand? Are they going contrary to any laws that we have in Nigeria? Then something else I also want to talk about, which I think Mr. Nosat touched on, is I think Mr. Fola, traditional knowledge and TCEs. We do have, if you look at section 31, makes provision for how folklore can be protected. And in order for you to use a folklore, you also have to get consent and authorization from the Nigerian, who are like the guard, or let's say the middle person. Then in terms of protecting TKs and TCs, you also need to educate in the community itself, because if you decide to trace, say you want to determine the chain of title, everyone, when it comes to folklore and traditional and the rest. So I know when we had the tourism week in Port Harcourt, the DG then made mention of how they would want to collaborate with the community, and someone was asking, so if you go to a particular community, or I'm from a particular community and I've heard different versions of this story, who now is telling the truth? And he goes to say, whatever version out there is your own truth. So someone has likened God of Thunder, the God of Thunder from Yoruba, and I was like, okay, I did say that. Are we telling our own story? So if you've watched Dragonaut on Netflix, it's a different. So put out your own version out there and own whatever content or work or you've put out there, not minding what people are going to see. Always talk at the end of the day, especially now when you have a lot of social media call out. Everyone wants to call the right step by talking to your lawyers or going to court proceedings. I know group 1 had mentioned that IPO legal advice, and I think that's very important, because when you're properly advised, you would know that a lot of options when you create your work. You have different IP rights attached to just one. So when the Big Brother had started this year, someone asked me a question: what was my thoughts with the word abeg? Can someone own the word abeg? And I was like, it's a little, if it goes to the trade registry, the examiner will have to determine whether or not it's descriptive or it's just. Do you think the word abeg is generic to Nigerian, or do you think the person who wants to use abeg as not just a business name but as an intellectual property should own the right to the word abeg? So I'm just going to end here. Oh yeah, in result this week. So I like to say there are two. You have two options: either you go to court, which is the Federal High Court, or you do an out of court settlement by exploring mediation or conciliation or arbitration. So I know in my interaction with creatives, most of them prefer to mediate because they have this perception that arbitration is expensive. I have a different view when it comes to arbitration. I don't think it's expensive. It just depends on your mode of proceeding, institutional arbitration. Then your claim as well will also determine what the cost for the proceeding will be. So it's different from litigation, where you can just put in an outrageous sum and the courts may or may not grant you your request. But in arbitration, I have to show and prove why the cost or the claim you're asking for, you actually deserve it. And then you have institutions like the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, who have schedule of fees. So it depends. It determines what the panel will charge you at the end of the day. if you have a single panel, fine and good, your fee may not be, but when you have a 3-man panel and then you have a chartered arbitrator, you have a fellow, someone with about 20 years experience or 15 years experience doing that particular type of IP, it's going to cost you money. It's not going to come cheap. So I know the blackface and two-face case that was settled 2 years ago. It was mediation ended up resolving their dispute at the end of the day. So what does that say? It now goes to show that, okay, instead of me going to make it in public, I can opt for out of court settlement where no one really knows what was settled at the end of the day. We all know that parties have settled, and that's the beauty and benefit of an out of court settlement or resolution mechanism. So I'll just stop here for now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ma, for that enlightening session. I'm really glad to have you today. Okay, so we have some questions from the various groups that have been asked, and I think in the course of the contributions from the mentors, they have answered some of those questions. So the questions are also in the chat box. Well, I'll be reading out the questions again so that our mentors can answer them for us. So the first question says, would we be right to say that folklore is protected under copyright? And then how best can traditional knowledge and cultural expression be protected? The third question is, will artificial intelligence have a counterproductive role in the pursuit of intellectual property protection and the curtailment of rights and privileges granted to technical innovations? And then will the use of open source code like GPL 3.0 in the process of creating a software program destroy the right to seek to protect that intellectual property of the program and benefit from its commercial ownership? Is it time to implement the inter-agency agreements that have been prepared between the countries of Africa, GCC, and Europe to adopt the digital signature around the world? And the next question says, what is the link between IP and economic policies? And whether does unfair competition qualify as a type of intellectual property? And then whether intellectual property disputes in commercial transactions can be handled under ADR. And then the last question is, what role does the government play in promoting IP foreign investment in Nigeria? So we'll open the floor to our mentors to please give us answers to these questions. We'll begin with Mr. Folarin, if he's still here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Okay.
Let me take a stab at the easy questions because I think everybody we have a fantastic panel this evening. So I would also like to learn as well. I will respond to the question on TK and TCE just for the simple, well, because I think Rita has already mentioned that traditional knowledge to some degree is protected by copyright. She mentioned in section 31 also of the Copyright Act. 31, 32, 33, I think, also deals with liability. So in a sense, but that is pretty much folklore, and copyright in that sense deals with the cultural expression, of folklore. So stories and similar types of works. Essentially, any work that is contained in section 1 of the Copyright Act, would fall into this category. But traditional knowledge and cultural expressions goes beyond the subject matter of copyright law. And it goes into the realm of, in some cases, patents. Rita fantastically also referenced, GIs, and a bunch of other, allied areas. So the question of whether it is protected, I would say Yes. Folklore, yes. TK is wider, and traditional cultural expressions are wider than what's it called, than folklore. Talking of traditional cultural expressions, Dambe, I don't know how many of us know about Dambe. Dambe is a traditional form of, it's a Hausa martial art, or let me reframe that. It's a martial art um, that is what's it called, home to some parts of northern Nigeria. It's been around since the 9th century, I think the 9th century AD. It's been around for many, many hundreds of years. And there are a group of young guys who resigned from one resigned from Jumia, was one of the founders in Jumia, and the other one resigned from Trace. He was country manager, program manager for Trace Africa, and they're both promoters of Dambe. They run a tournament, Dambe Warriors. Fantastic stuff. And it's been covered by CNN, by RT, by the entire world. It was after it was covered, by the international press, that the Honorable Minister of Sports now reached out to them and said, "Oh, come, let's see what we can do about, formalizing this as a sport that can probably even go into the Olympics." Now, why is this significant? Today, we take it for granted that the martial arts are, what they are, are an international sport. But don't forget, the martial arts are, to a large extent, traditional to some parts of the world. So to parts of Asia, even though everybody says martial arts originated from Africa, but to a very large degree, you find that because Asia has chosen to own it, especially the Wing Chun, the karate, the Kung Fu, and other Taekwondo and other styles, it has spawned into all manner of industries. It has affected culture, movies, music, etc. So it's very important that I think first we should understand that yes, we may not, the Copyright Act may not specifically refer to TK or traditional cultural expressions, but there are so many ways in which it can be protected. And I referenced the case we filed earlier. So to cut a very long story short, we found out that, and this is not something new. We didn't make a new discovery. It is known all over South America that salsa originated from Nigeria, from southwestern Yoruba. It was the Yoruba slaves who were taken, I think, towards the end of the slave trade. A very large number of Yoruba men from Ilesha, the Ilesha region of southwest Yoruba, currently in Osun State, were taken to what's it called, to the plantations to work as slaves. And I think the Bantus were the largest of all the different tribes that were taken as slaves. The Bantus were the largest, but the Bantus they spoke different dialects, different languages. And so the Yorubas were actually the largest homogeneous group that spoke one language. And so they went with of course, their gods and their, dances and all of that. And so what you find is salsa is similar to bata in so many ways. One, the movements, the footwork are the same. Salsa counts 1 to 7, or is it 1 to 9? Bata counts its steps in the same way. The costume also very similar. The interplay between the male and the female elements, very similar. And then most importantly, the culture. Bata is a form of what's it called? Is a dance that is linked to Shango worship or the adherents of Shango. Anywhere you see salsa, there's a shrine or a reference to Shango somewhere, very close by, and this is something that is known all over the world. But guess what? It's not known here in Nigeria, and so we said, okay, let's file an action. So we had a conversation with the salsa community in Nigeria, and we said, what's that saying? Until the lion learns to write, the story of the hunt will always be told by the hunter. Because our culture is largely oral and is not written. Said, okay, can we get a court to say, okay, this is African culture, to at least come up with some kind of documentary statement that can then be used, to push this conversation further. So there are many. We have the, what's it called? We have many of the tools, though raw. We just have to be creative and imaginative in the way we use them. It's very interesting. I really appreciate Mr. Nosar's intervention. This topic is IP. We all know is very wide. In fact, just yesterday we filed an FOI because you can't really have any meaningful conversation without talking numbers and figures. And unfortunately, we've tried to interface with the Bureau of Statistics to get concrete figures, but it's a little difficult. So yesterday we filed an FOI with the Trademark Registry to get actual information on the number of applications filed. I used to track it off the record some years ago, but we want official documentation because it doesn't appear that the figures that are out in the open, are accurate. So that's another thing too. One needs to also start to have a fact-based, practical conversation, I think, about some of these traditional cultural expressions. If you ask anybody what's traditional knowledge, people start going all the way to some place in Kenya and then one fruit somewhere. I had a conversation with the head of a parastatal, and she said they just concluded a research, very huge research recently on, I see you smiling, seriously. They conducted a very huge research on economic, but there's a phrase that they call them, but essentially they are plants that have high economic value but are not recognized, as what's it called, as crops that should be, as they're not popular, in short, but they have very high economic potential. This is also part of our what's it called, traditional knowledge. Yeah, I don't want to appear as if I'm a traditionalist, even though I'm an Ijesha man. But let me restrict my what's it called, answers to that, since I've taken up a huge chunk of the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Folarin. Really appreciate that. Okay, so we'll move on to Mr. Nosar. So take any of the questions that have not been taken yet.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Folarin. I was beginning to think that you were a traditional, maybe a herbalist, but thank God you cleared it. Almost beginning to, over time they've given Kanayo a cultist toga. So I was almost beginning to give you a herbalist toga. So let's move on. I would like to respond to the question on artificial intelligence. You see, the way our laws are structured, and even globally, we like to tie IP protection to human beings, understandably. We like to tie it to personality. So it says that the confusion or the challenge has always been, okay, if a machine produces machine learning, machine has observed a particular behavior over time and is now able to produce something. So who do you give the IP rights to that? So ordinarily, by default, you probably will want to give it to, you say, how can I give it to a machine? I would rather give it to the programmer who, the source code, originator, owner, and everything. So that has been how it is. We've been very comfortable with giving IP ownership, authorship to the owners of the programmer, the writers of the source code and everything. But we've had a major breakthrough in July where at least a machine, I mean, an AI itself was given IP by the South African Patent Office. That was, that had to do with an AI that had to do with food. So I'm sure that over time, cautiously, even in the US, in the UK, they are gravitating towards that cautiously to begin to look at it. But my own challenge with that is that there are some AIs that produce another AI. So you have an AI who has learned a process and produces another AI. So the question now is that you have two AIs interchanging with each other. Though there was an author as the originator, I mean, somebody who fed, but an AI produces another AI. So who do you give the IP rights to? Is it the author? Is it the first AI? Or is it the second AI? But like I said, these are discussions that are going to evolve. But suffice it to say that we have moved further, at least in Africa. I'm not sure I've heard any case in Nigeria that AI has been given IP rights, but at least in South Africa now, even though it's contentious, a lot of people are arguing about it, but at least the patent office had given Davos on July 28th this year, AI the right to claim its intellectual property. So that is why I think I would leave it. It's work in progress, but we will definitely get there. But we have to be very careful in giving machines intellectual property, rights to intellectual property. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nosa. Okay, so I don't know if Mrs. Rita still wants to add to answers for any of the questions, because I know she has touched on some of them.
Okay, I'm not really sure what to say again, but I think I'll just talk a bit on number, let's see, for where it talked on open source codes. Like, so we know that even if they are open source code, they also have intellectual property rights attached to them. So software, either this could be the patent rights, or the codes itself could be copyright rights or trademarks. However, if a code has been put to the public, you also have to adhere to the terms for using such free work out there. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to actually use the, but there you're not acknowledging that you got this code from a particular platform. So for instance, I know I made mention of Creative Commons, copyleft, permissive, all of those things. Those are the things that I think the software industry and developers need to take notice of. So this year we had the biggest, I'll call it the biggest copyright case. We had the Google Oracle case where I think 11,500 lines of codes were used to create another code, and they were claiming fair use for the US, fair dealing for Nigeria here. And the court agreed with them, saying that it was fair use. And a lot of people were against it and making several comments. And then questions that I did get was, how is that going to affect the software in places like Nigeria or any other African country? We know that IP basically is territorial. So if the court decides to use an international precedent to counter or set its own precedent here in Nigeria, I think that's not going to be an issue. You have to look at the purpose for which that working was created. Was it for commercial purpose or educational purpose? Those are the things that we also need to look to. Then time to implement the interagency agreements. I think African countries decided treaties, not, I would say we don't really go through this. So because I'm an arbitrator, we have where you find out that some of the treaties that we've signed are not favorable to Africa, because when we signed it, we basically did not have the right professionals go review the document or help in drafting or be part of the negotiation. So that becomes an issue at the end of the day. In terms of timeline, I think so if you're following the conversation on the African Free Continental Trade Agreement, you know that the IP protocol is supposed to commence 2 or 3 years after. I think so, I'm not sure now. But then how many people are being involved in this conversation? Are the practitioners themselves involved? Are the creatives themselves involved? are the stakeholders actually taking notice of all of this? We try to emulate the Western world a lot, without also looking at our environment at the day. Then another question is, does unfair competition qualify as a type of IP? For me, I would say is yes and no. Because when you're looking at IP from the industrial aspect and the copyright aspect, where does unfair competition fit into? Because I know, I think 3 years ago, there was this case about the Dudu Oshun case, but that happened in the United States, where unfair competition was one of the issues raised by the owner of the product. And what the court had decided then was, if you're using a particular product, taking advantage of the reputation of that product at the end of the day, you're basically misleading and not creating a healthy environment, because one, your intention is mischievous. And then you also need to look at what are the competition laws available within that territory. I know we have I think the FCC have been doing a great job. Yeah, I follow them on social media, and they are always posting or doing press releases on what they do. But then the typical Nigerian mindset when it comes to products and competition and the rest of it, I think we still have a lot of awareness and educating the general public, and also, like Mr. Folarin saying, acceptance is very low. I've only come across one person in my entire life in Nigeria where I've bought a product and I have to take it back to them and complain about a defect, and they returned it or asked me to get one. If you look at the social media, especially Instagram, most of this Instagram sellers no refund policy. What are we doing about that? What are the policies put in place to checkmate these things? So I think I've answered the resolution aspect. But if you're wanting to know the types of IP dispute, I think basically, if you're looking at IP dispute from the commercial aspect, out of court settlement is best for you, whether it's mediation, arbitration, or conciliation or negotiation. But if you're looking at the bigger picture of setting precedents, your jurisdiction, I think the courts, it's a better alternative. And we need that in Nigeria, because when you have conversations with creatives, innovators, or business owners, the question is, do we have a precedent? We don't have a law. Do we have this? We have that? And everyone's always complaining, but not ready to learn. So yeah, I guess I'll stop here for now.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Okay, so we acknowledge the presence of some of our other mentors who are also present on the program today. We have Mr. Max Ikongbe and Mr. Christian Aniko. So just give them a second to just say hi, the mentees, and then we'll close. So Mr. Max. Okay, I don't know if it's still okay.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, we can hear you now, sir.
Yeah, so I said, just as I've been mandated, I say hi to all the mentees, and I wish you all the best in this quarter of the program, and I hope you get to enjoy it and learn a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Max. So over to Mr. Christian Aniko. Okay. Mr. Christian, I think you're still muted.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here and enjoy the conversation so far. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Christian. So at this point, we would close the program for today. I want to appreciate our mentors. Time has been fast spent, but they have stayed to the very end. I appreciate our mentors for taking out time to share their wealth of knowledge with us. Someone said that the best form of leadership is mentoring, and you have showed this exemplary leadership style. We really appreciate. We thank you also we also appreciate the mentees who have made this program possible. So without them, this program would not be successful. So we appreciate each and everyone who has been present today. And I'd like to hand over to the convener at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sewese. Thank you, Ms. Rita. Thank you, Mr. Folari. Thank you, Mr. Nusa. Thank you, Mr. Kristen. Thank you, Mr. Max. Thank you to all the mentees who have been here and for putting your videos on. Thank you so much. I know that today has actually dragged a bit, but I'm sure that we've been able to learn something. Happy Independence to everyone. Somebody said that she has a question. Please, because of the time, we might not be able to take that question, but you can ask your question in the WhatsApp group, and then everyone can give like a joint answer. And if it's not enough, then we can refer you to any of the mentors present. So thank you so much, everyone. We meet next week, Friday. Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Sewese. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.